May 27th, 2023. Well, Ron DeSantis has finally entered the Republican primary race after waiting for some time, and along with many other candidates. And so, as at the present time, most of the polling shows that Donald Trump is running at about above 50%, like something like 53 or something like that, with DeSantis running at about 20% or thereabouts, giving a substantial lead to Trump, who basically gained a lot after the indictment in the Manhattan by that crazy prosecutor they got up there on some really um, you know, bad charges that are not really appropriate. But anyhow, I want to kind of get into this situation about the race and where I see things going. And because I think that the thing that I keep missing in almost all the coverage, people are treating this race like it's just a normal race and the normal um, things that would apply to a race or what's going to happen. And of course, I think that's absolutely not what's going to happen here. Um, if it wasn't for Democrat prosecutors, I would say that it's almost a certainty that Trump would get get the nomination, and it's basically, and then we're up in a situation where it's kind of, how would the race go and all that in the general election. However, that's not what the situation is. We have Democrats are clearly planning on prosecuting Trump. I mean, this is no doubt about this. In fact, as I understand that there's also a major civil case having to do with some of his business dealings years ago, uh, uh, before he even got into politics, that will be actually go on trial, I think, somewhere next spring, right during the middle of the campaign and key primary time periods. Of course, that being a civil case, he doesn't have to personally attend the trial. And so, although it will be another distraction and something that will probably end up costing him some money. Um, but the cases that are really going to be dangerous, I think, particularly, are to a lesser extent the Georgia case. I'm still iffy about that because I'm not sure what all's involved in that. I have a much better grasp, I think, of what's going on in the federal case that the special prosecutor, Jack Smith, is about to put forward. And of course, so on the merits, let's just forget that for the moment and get on the merits. I mean, basically, either candidate, in my opinion, Trump or DeSantis, is basically almost equally acceptable, in my opinion. They each have their strengths and each have their vulnerabilities, I guess you'd say. Um, I mean, Trump obviously has the strength of having been president for 4 years and having the accomplishments he had. The vulnerabilities he has is, well, all of his somewhat erratic behaviors, which get him in trouble with all sorts of establishment entities, including the legal system. Um, so, and DeSantis, I think, is a much cleaner, normal candidate that doesn't have those kind of problems or any real legal problems. But again, you are dealing with somebody that's newer and less well known by the general public, I think. Um, but the idea, I mean, I think that most of the ads that I've been seeing Trump running against DeSantis are just completely nonsense. I mean, this is not a reason to vote against DeSantis. He's not going to eliminate Social Security or cut it, and we're not going to end up with a massive sales tax. That's a whole thing that goes back when he was a freshman congressman, and he got involved with some of these Republican study groups that are looking for ways to, make the Social Security system more financially solvent, and also ideas that this tax thing, goes back to Huckabee's campaign, if you recall that. At any rate, it's never going to happen. It's all a pipe dream idea. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it's also not really going to happen. So it doesn't really much matter, in my opinion. And the latest thing trying to say, well, that there are more deaths of COVID in Florida than New York, I think misses the key point that there's a lot of elderly people that retired in Florida, and so obviously you have when you actually adjust for the population differences on a per capita basis, actually Florida did better than New York. But again, that's not the real issue. I think either one of them would be pretty good on almost all the issues. So anyhow, but the problem is getting back to what's going to happen with Trump's campaign, is that Jack Smith and this prosecutor down in Georgia are going to indict him. My guess is that ultimately, if there's any integrity at all in the New York court system, they'll throw out that case. But not guaranteed, but if there's any integrity, they will. I mean, the prosecutor can file the case, but so far I don't think even the charges have been defined properly. And the thing's supposed to have a hearing in December or something. But I think eventually that'll get thrown out. But the other two, if there's more to Georgia than simply the phone call to the Secretary of State, it could be dangerous. And of course, the biggest danger is of course, on the long run, of course, is that the president can't actually pardon somebody for a state offense due to the dual sovereignties rules. So that presents a certain sort of danger that even if a Republican wins, that may be hard on that. On the issue of the Jack Smith, who's a notoriously partisan prosecutor, considering what he did to the governor of Virginia many years ago, I think we can be pretty clear cut that this guy is out to no good, as I mentioned in previous videos. And so we look at the prospect of an indictment, and we don't know when it's coming down. There's three basic areas of charges I see coming up. One is just a security issue. The other is the so-called obstruction of justice issue. And then, of course, there's this sort of conspiracy to obstruct the presidential transition, or however they want to call it. Now, the key point here is that we live in a system with a two-tier justice system. I mean, for instance, before everybody totally flips out here what I'm saying, remember that Hillary Clinton also committed a serious security violation by having her server in which classified information was present on a very unsecure non-government server that wasn't properly encrypted. And then, under subpoena, she deleted over 30,000 emails that were under subpoena. So clearly she's guilty of either security violations, but obstruction of justice. But what happened? The government, the so-called Justice Department, decided not to file charges, and the FBI director at the time, James Comey, said that no reasonable prosecutor would ever file a charge in this case. Now let's look at what happened to Manafort, who was Trump's campaign manager for a period of time during the 2016 campaign. I mean, he, along with Tony Podesta, had been involved in dealings in Ukraine and so forth. And of course, it ends up that he gets prosecuted and sent to prison, and only out because he was pardoned by Trump. But on the other hand, Tony Podesta, involved in some of the same deals, not even touched. See, this is a pretty example of how the system is a two-tier justice system. And so these examples, and there are other cases of this sort which we're seeing. And what I'm getting at is, so when I'm saying that these charges exist, I'm not justifying the charges. I'm simply saying that there's Democrats, they're in positions of power. They have the power to do damage. They have the courts with Democrat-appointed judges, or maybe if they end up getting Republican, it'll probably be somebody that totally wimps out. But Democrat-appointed judges, with almost certainly all Democrat juries are close to it, particularly in the D.C. case, which relates to the federal case, which is the real threat as I see it. And they're going to buy these charges. And in spite of the fact that Biden gets by with it, that Hillary Clinton gets by with it, in the case of Trump, they're going to actually press the charges. Just look at how they treated the people on January the 6th compared to the rioters out in Seattle that were continually attacking the federal court there and violently assaulting federal marshals protecting the court, seriously injuring some of them. They were all let go. But the many of the January 6 people are being held without bail for charges that are not usually held without bail. And in many cases giving very stiff sentences, such as the Oath Keepers leader just getting 18 years. Okay, so what I'm getting at, this is a biased system. I'm trying to illustrate, understand where I'm coming from here. I voted for Trump twice. I gave hundreds of dollars to his campaigns both times. Okay, so I'm not anti at all. But I'm telling you, what's going to happen is they're going to prosecute the man. They're going to prosecute him at the worst possible times to disrupt and interfere with the election process, damaging the Republican Party. And if we go with Trump, we're going to have a candidate who's going to be put on trial during the election year and convicted. Not fairly, but it's going to happen if that's the situation we have. And I think that's the case I see for DeSantis. That's the big discriminator. They don't really have any clear charge against him. I mean, most of the problems Trump had was because he behaved in a very unusual way, overreacted to the outcome of the 2020 election, and didn't accept what had been done, and was ambiguous enough. And then he handled these documents in ways that Democrats get by with, but Republicans don't, unless maybe they're connected to the establishment in some way, the ones that conservatives are really suspicious of. But so that's kind of the situation we're facing here. And I just want to kind of lay this out. And that's what we're not hearing on Fox News or Newsmax about this campaign. Okay. Yeah, Trump's way ahead by over 50% right now, but it's irrelevant. Are we seriously going to be able to elect a candidate who's probably going to be facing trial, actually probably going on trial during the campaign perhaps, if not already convicted by then? And the Democrat jury is going to convict. Is there any doubt about it? It's not a fair jury. It's not an open-minded jury. It's a jury of D.C. Democrats. 93% of the state, the state, hope not, city is Democrat in all the elections. And so, all the prosecutor has to do is just do their peremptory challenge on the one or two Republicans that happen to get in the pool, and they got an all-Democrat jury set to convict before a Democrat. We've seen what's happened in all the other cases, and how they continually, make rulings in favor of the prosecution, like in the Manafort case, for instance, or do I need to go further? So that's what's going to happen, and that's why I think the best case for Trump personally, I think, would be that they actually basically say, okay, if you'll drop out of the campaign, we'll reduce the charges to something, minor, if you plead to some minor charge, and maybe we'll put you under house arrest at Mar-a-Lago or something for a year or something. That's the best case that could happen if he's willing to do this. If he does a typical Trump stonewall to the end, it's probably going to end up with a prison sentence. And then the question is, of course, but that'll happen probably maybe before the election, but it won't probably be served after the election, I don't guess. Although, that's another issue. The real issue is appeals courts. Well, the appellate court's full of Democrat appointees in D.C. So it's got to get to the Supreme Court before anything positive happens. And so far, the Supreme Court, as we've seen, has not done much to intervene. He's made various appeals to them over many of the things about executive privilege and the like. They haven't been helpful. So I think, so you see this, I'm just trying to lay this out. I mean, I know it's bad news. I always hear bad news, but this is the situation. And I think this is basically the case for DeSantis. And so I really would recommend that Trump quit attacking DeSantis. He doesn't need to worry about him because he's not going to beat him. It's going to come down to the battle is really between him and these prosecutors. And the Georgia case is another one. If he got in any way involved in that break into that voting system, they may have a serious charge there too. I think the whole thing about the call to the Secretary of State, I think they might get a conviction, but I think on appeal in the Georgia system, he probably get it overturned. I think that to me is ridiculous. But the other stuff is more substantive, and honestly, it's not so much that's wrong. It's just that they let Democrats get by with it, you know. And and so anyway, that's just kind of my take on the thing, and we'll have to see what really transpires. But I just want to kind of go through this because the media is not really laying this out for us very well. I guess you listen to the Democrats; they're gloating about each little piece of evidence and each little thing that the prosecutors come up with and all that nonsense. But the fact of the matter is, it is what it is, and that's where we're heading. So at any rate, I'll kind of be wrapping this up now, but I just kind of felt I had to say this. I mean, because you know, we're hoping for the best, but it's absolutely critical that we win this election. And almost any of the Republicans running would be better than any of the Democrats. It's that simple. The Democrats want to seize power. They're abusing power right now. You can see how they're using the FBI and other government agencies. They fired these IRS agents that were investigating Hunter Biden. All sorts of abuse of power. And it's very critical we win this election, and that's why we have to make the tough choices, I think, that are going to have to be made. So at any rate, I'll be posting this on Rumble as well, and of course the addresses of my social media accounts will be in the description below as always. And until next time.